That would be bad. I need somebody to help me. Yeah, Larry, why don't you help me? We're just gonna move the table. This is part of the sermon. We're just gonna take it forward. All right. Thanks. That's fair. All right. Hey, we're doing this series, Failures in Faith. We're in Genesis. We're working through the book of Genesis. We're starting at Genesis 12. We're going to go to Genesis 50. We're focusing in on like these main characters that you've heard of: Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph will be kind of like the top heads, and we talk about them. And I'm talking about them on Sunday morning, and just kind of their journey of how they trusted God, how they failed in trusting God, how they did silly things, and we just kind of been working through it a little bit. And for me, it's been fun because I haven't preached on Old Testament like this. I haven't preached through stories or narratives, and it's fun for me to do it. I don't know. I'm just loud. Does it matter? It does matter. It does matter. Haha. Well, but here's what I found out. Every story is the same. The same thing keeps happening over and over again. It's like the same story, different name. If you're to read on, which we're not gonna read it today, but if you read on, Isaac does the very thing that Abraham does. The exact same thing. He's gonna drop that on his head. Forever the tinkerer. Always tinkering. And so I want to ask you a question today. As I got into it, I was like, these all say the same thing. I could say the exact same thing I said last week. And actually the scriptures are pretty redundant. Like, do you love God? That's the question, yes or no. If you love God, what are you going to do about it? If you're going to follow me, what are you going to do about it? Many times, we ask the silly question, why are things not going right for me? Or why are things so difficult? Anybody going through a hard space in their life right now? Or feeling like they got to make a difficult decision? Or feel a little heavy about something? Or, let's just make it count. Is everybody a little tired and exhausted? And I'm not talking 2020. I'm just talking like, that's the human condition. And so I will tell you that the Bible doesn't give much clarity on why we feel the way we feel, other than two things. One, are you living with sin? Two, are you repenting of your sin? That's about it. We come up with all these rules and different ideas of how to handle life, or how to work through our struggle, or how to solve this problem. But at the end of the day, are you living with sin or not? You can fill your brain with all kinds of stuff, all kinds of methods and teachings and ideas, but are you living with sin or are you not? See, all of these books, if you want to know everything about Luke, read it. If you want to know everything about the first part of Luke, read it. If you want to know about the Avengers, read it. All of these books, we fill now everybody's like, did you put a Bible up there? No, I didn't put a Bible up there. These are doctrine books. These are theology books. These are books that people put sermons together with. Constant sermons, messages. And if you were to go to my office, you would find that I have hundreds of these books. What do? What good is a book? I'm out. Who's tired of me throwing books? You can fill your brain with stuff. I can give you names and locations and dates and events and how to pronounce it in Hebrew and why this matters. And remember last week I was like blown away because Golgotha and the Temple Mount and where Abraham took Isaac, it was all the same location. I'm like, whoa, you know where I learned that? In one of these books. So it was good for me. But I'm tired of us pretending like I need to fill you guys with knowledge so that we can do this life thing better. Because that's not how it works. I promise, that's not how it works. There is one very simple problem that we all have in the human condition is sin. That's it. That's the one thing that's tripping us up all of the time. Now, your sin, my sin, that guy's sin, her sin, the little kid's sin, all that sin may look different and live itself out a little bit differently, but it's still sin. And the failures that we find through the Old Testament is still sin. The story for this morning is Jacob and Esau. It's the beginning of a new character, Jacob and Esau. And we'll read it in a second because I want to read it to you because I think it's really interesting. But you have these moments happen in this story where there's deception and lying and selfishness and this desire to elevate over someone else. Those are all kind of like categories of one big thing called what? Sin. Sin. I was studying all week long. Now, I wasn't using these books. I didn't throw any books that I was studying. I threw books that I didn't need. This is the only book that I looked at all week long. The Avengers. But this idea kept landing on me, and I'll read the story, and it kept landing on me over and over again. Why didn't Jacob just confess his wrong? Why didn't he just go to his brother Esau and say, I'm sorry, I screwed up? Why not just say, I'm sorry? Why is it so difficult for us to confess our wrongdoings? And that just kept landing on me all week long to where I like, why not just apologize? Now, husbands and wives in this room, freshly minted husband and wife in this room, you've gotten in a fight before, right? Occasionally, one or two. Maybe a half of a fight, let's be honest. Most people don't fight, but Adrienne and I, we're the only ones who argue, I guess. But you've gotten in some sort of argument or fight, and I'm not airing any sort of canoeing stories here. They're pretty solid. There's been times when Adrienne and I have got an argument or a fight or a disagreement or a quarrel or a lover spat. To where it was way easier just to pretend like it didn't happen. To pretend like we weren't upset at each other. To let the distance gain on the fight. To eventually it just kind of dissipates. Well, we all know how that goes, man. Because when you circle back and do the same thing that you did 6 years ago, you will be reminded. I've been reminded a handful of times on the same failures that I've had. So much so that Adrienne's justified in her frustration at certain things. Incredibly justified. But it's not like because I pretend like it didn't happen and we get some distance and I'm over here at this point, and that happened in 1997. We didn't meet at that point. But it happened a long time ago. That it's not a big deal anymore. You see, when we hurt each other and sin happens, it sticks, it attaches, it lives with you, it sticks with you, it's there forever. Until what? Until you apologize, until you confess, until you say, I'm sorry. That is a significant part of, I think, this story and what I've learned. Why does a family fail, and why do they flourish? Why does your household feel like tension, or why does it feel like joy? And there's a correlation with the amount of confession that happens in your household versus the amount of ignoring the elephant in the room. One of the most painful things I've ever done in my life as a father is I beat my son with a metal spoon. Carter. I'm using the word beat because that's what it felt like on my end. But I shouldn't hold that anymore. But we were going through a process in our house of spanking our kids. And one of the things we started doing was, instead of me going and getting the weapon, all you evil parents who are spanking your children. No, I'm just kidding. Instead of us going and getting the spoon or whatever tool we were using, we asked our kids to go get it. So it wasn't a function of our rage. It created distance between our frustration or the discipline and what was about to come. It created a space so I could cool down, and so they could understand what was happening. And so by the time we got to the spanking portion of the moment, it was a little bit softer. It was a little bit more understood. It was a little bit more gracious. There was a connection that happened between me and whoever was getting disciplined. Well, this time, I think Carter, I don't know, you might have been like 3 or 4. You were young, very young. And I said, Carter, he had been misbehaving. I don't even remember the incident of what he was doing, and we don't need to hear about it now. He was probably eating in the wrong space. He was doing something. And I said, Carter, if you do that another time, you're going to get a spanking. And sure enough, he did it. And so I said, Carter, go get the spoon. So Carter mopes over to the house in Michigan where we live. He opens up the drawer. He pulls out a spoon. He brings it to me. I put him on my knee. 3 swats. Pop, pop, pop. Although I hear Carter crying at that cry that's a little bit different than the spanking cry, we didn't pull the pants down. It wasn't like that. I looked at my hand, and it was a metal spoon. I had hit Carter 3 times with a metal spoon. Now, the effect that it had on Carter was probably not as great as it had on me. Because I looked at the spoon, and what did I immediately do? I hugged you, and I started crying. Because I realized that I just did something that actually violated my son in a way that was painful and wasn't intended to be painful. It was discipline. Uncomfortable, yes, but not painful. Not painful in a way to where he was going to be wounded. And it was a metal spoon. I immediately apologized. I hugged him. I said I was sorry. There's probably a time in my space in life where I would have ignored that and been stubborn about it and said, I didn't screw up. You deserve the discipline I just gave you for disobeying. But in our house, and I will say this out loud with authority and live it in front of you guys, and this is something I'm proud of us, and I don't wear it as a badge, but in our house, confession and apologizing and admitting our wrong is a value. We have it as a value to where when we misstep or we screw up, we say we're sorry. And we work on that because when we know that we have flaws, when we know that we're struggling, we can identify it as sin and say, this is an issue, and I'm sorry that I mistreated you, or I spoke harshly to you, or I said bad things to you, or I was disrespectful, or whatever that whole thing is. That means we have taken the sin and we put it at the appropriate spot away from the relationship and given it to the Lord and asked for forgiveness, and forgiveness is granted to where the relationship is like this. Amen. So whether life is hard in our household, confession is a thing that we value. And so as I was reading this story, which we're going to get into here in just a second, I continue to feel like there just needed to be someone in this story who said, I'm sorry. Why didn't someone just go, I'm sorry? It could have fixed centuries of war if somebody just would have said, I am so sorry. Genesis chapter 25 is where we're at.
picking up at verse 19. As you're hearing this, again, why are all these books on the floor? It's not because I wanted to throw books. It's because it's simple. The walk with the Lord is simple. Remove the sin. Confess the sin. Live like this with God. Like this. It's not about knowledge. It's not about content. It's not about doctrine or theology. Those things are fun and good to talk about. But at its core, it's about restored relationship with the creator of the heavens and earth, with God the Father, with Yahweh. And that comes by us admitting our failures and saying, I need forgiveness. Now, hear the story with that in mind. Verse 19, these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean. Isn't it fun? Of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because, what? She was barren too? God chose a bunch of people to show how great he was. As you hear these stories, remember, God is establishing his community, his people, his nation. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is thus, why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. So she's talking, right? Rebekah's talking to God. God's telling her what's going to happen. Why is this thing happening inside of me? And not just am I feeling the tension of having twins or having these creatures inside of me, but there's something more happening here. There's a deeper spiritual kind of like tension that's going on. And God says to her, he just flat out says, there's going to be tension, and they're going to not like each other. But here's the result of that tension. One shall be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Here's how it's going to play itself out. Here's this thing you're feeling, this tension, this pressure, here's how it's going to fix itself. This one will be strong, but he'll serve the baby. When her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy cloak, so they called his name Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter and the man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau. He ate his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stew, for I'm exhausted. Therefore his name was called Edom. Jacob said, sell me your birthright now. I mean, seriously. How evil is that? You know what? I'll cook you a meal, but first, give me your inheritance. I mean, think about the evilness there. This isn't just like, I think we just read over this story when we've read it or heard it or talked about it in Sunday school or where somebody put it up on a flannel graph board and we heard the story and we're like, yeah, we just read through it like this is evil what's happening here. Evil, manipulation, lying, ugliness. This is sin is what's happening right here. Esau said, I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me? Jacob said, swear to me now. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. He just manipulated the relationship. Manipulated it. Brothers manipulating the relationship so one benefits and the other one doesn't. One acts out selfishly to get what he wants in the moment, not living or thinking for the long term, not living or thinking about what God is doing through their family. This is a man who knows how God worked through grandfather Abraham and brought him to this place. He knows this story, but still despises it. All right, great. Why does that matter? Let's see how the story progresses. Flip over with me to 27. Now, this is one of the more famous stories in Genesis. This is where, and where again, lying, cheating, stealing take place in God's centerpiece family. When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." And he said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver, your bow, and go out in the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me a delicious food such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, and that my soul may bless you before I die." Now this is, remember, Isaac loves the meat and the hunting that Esau had. He's asking him to provide this one last thing before he dies. Give me this thing so that I feel full and satisfied, and I can bestow on you my love, and remind me of the relationship that we had, of this thing that we had. Remind me of it. Now Rebekah was listening. She was eavesdropping when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went out into the field to hunt for game and to bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare me a delicious food, that I may eat and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, so that I may prepare them in a delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." But Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, "Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man." He knows what's happening. He's like, we're going to trick Dad. Trick him. Now, if you're Rebekah, and you already know God spoke to you and said, the older brother will serve the younger, why are you stressed about this moment? Why are you freaking out about this? Why? Why are you taking matters into your own hands? Why do you not trust the very words that God said to you? Let me ask, does that happen to you? To where you know a way in which you're supposed to live, a thing that you're supposed to do, but you don't. Because you don't trust that it's going to work out right. You don't trust that you're going to have the desired finish. You don't trust that the thing that you are craving at the end will come to fruition. So you take matters into your own hands. I wonder how many times we have relationships that just dissolve because they're not going the way that we want to, with the way that they benefit self or benefit me. You see, this family is filled with selfishness. And at the same time, they're at the center of God's plan, which is so confusing. That's why I throw all these books on the floor, because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. These books can't tell you anything. They tell you that this is chaotic and real, and we've lived these lives before, and we live selfishness, and we live sinfully, and we manipulate, and we steal, and we take from one another, and we hurt one another, and we are hurtful people. So just say what? I'm sorry. But no, we just continue to progress so that we can gain and receive and get the things that we want. We have a phrase in our house that gets said every now and again. My wife started it. It's pretty funny. When somebody says, "I want something," it's usually filled with some sort of selfish ambition or desire, right? Like, "I just want to," and Adrienne will go, "I want." And it's irritating, by the way. But it's a reminder every time she does it, to where I go, oh, yeah, maybe it is something I just want. Who am I running over to get what I want? See, we're taught as red-blooded Americans to go get what we want. Just do it. Take it. But who are we running over to get what we want? So Jacob's showing the flaw in the plan. "Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I'm a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him and bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing?" His mother said to him, "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go, bring them to me." It's just evil. As the story unfolds, the plan is hatched. It works out. They trick him. Blessing happens. Who gets mad in the process? Esau's ticked. Everything breaks down. Now we're fighting in wars for 10,000 years because of these people hating each other so much. If you trace these two people back to their origins. You have the Jews and you have the Arabs, and they hate each other because of a trick. Told us at our men's breakfast this morning. I'm really fascinated with military history right now, and I made Carter watch Black Hawk Down with me yesterday because it's the anniversary of that weekend. Operation, I forgot the name of it. It just left my brain. What is it? Gothic Serpent. Operation Gothic Serpent. Again, it's not lost on me, that conflict that happened there, the conflict that's happened all over the place. It starts right here, this conflict. The conflict there, all of the men in history and women in history and neighborhoods in history have been destroyed because of this. Why didn't somebody just say, "I'm sorry"? You see, in humanity, we tend to go after what we want. And we usually run over everybody in the process of what we want. Then Jesus arrives on the scene, and he comes teaching the exact opposite of humanity. If somebody hits you, do what? Turn the other cheek. Love your enemies. Love them. Pray for those who persecute you. He teaches a Good Samaritan. All through his teaching, he's flipping this world upside down. This relationship that was broken right here as God's trying to bless and create his own community that was destroyed with the behavior of selfishness. Jesus is reconciling that back to himself. He's coming and saying, "No, this is how we will live. No, this is what it's going to look. I'm going to turn your world upside down. Who's going to be the greatest in my kingdom? The least. Who's going to matter the most? The weakest. Who should you care about? The outsider. Who's not in this room?" Jesus continually addressed and attacked that because at the core, man is driven by his selfishness, by his own passion, by his own wants, the I want behavior. I want the blessing. I want your birthright. I want. The creator of heaven and earth, Yahweh, God, he says, "I want you." Regardless of your failure, regardless of your mistakes, regardless of your wounds, regardless of your knowledge, regardless of your skill, your talents, whoever, whatever, your sin, I want you. He wants this. Are you willing? Are you able? Are you capable of saying, "Yes, I'm sorry for all that I've sinned against you"? In fact, I think there's probably spaces in our own lives where we need to apologize to somebody. I don't even know. There might be somebody in this room that you need to apologize to. We had a moment like that 6 or 7 months ago where there was a relationship that needed to be restored, and it happened during communion. It was pretty special. There's brokenness that happens. There's people that you hold grudges against. There's a frustration or a bitterness that's growing inside of you towards someone, something, somebody who's maybe done the I want to you and taken from you. I don't want us to be a bunch of Esau's who just go off and are mad and are angry and bitter and frustrated. And as the story goes, that's what happens. Bitterness takes shape, takes root. It plants itself deep inside of here, and it grows. Grows. Do you know what lily of the valley is? Anybody know what lily of the valley? It is an invasive, ugly plant. Everybody's like, oh, look at it. It's got these pretty little bulbs on it. They're white and they're pretty. It's invasive. It will kill everything. If you just let it go, you'll have a yard of lily of the valley. I don't even know if lily of the valley grows in this state. But let me assure you, in Michigan, if you ignore lily of the valley, your house will become lily of the valley. People will walk by and say, what sort of weirdo lives in that house? Their whole house looks like a weed. It just grows. It grows everywhere. Just like bitterness. Bitterness will rage on you. Bitterness will grab you, twist you, and it will slowly choke the life out of you. So that you can't even function as a follower of God, as someone who says, I love God. You're just sucked dry because you're so bitter inside, because somebody wronged you, somebody hurt you, somebody didn't say, I'm sorry to you. And that hurts. I have it in my own life too. To where there are times where I lead with a chip on my shoulder because people haven't apologized to me in my lifetime, who owe me an apology. There's times where I'll hurt other people because I was hurt that way. You know that dumb cliche, hurt people hurt people? It's true. Most cliches are. But there's a fix for it all. And that's this, communion. There's a fix. Now, communion doesn't fix it, but the process of what happens to create communion does. Jesus flipped it all upside down. Jesus is the fire that burns out lily of the valley. Actually, you can't even kill lily of the valley with fire. I tried it. Let's come up with something better than that. Jesus is the dump truck rototiller thing that digs up your entire yard and throws it away. It starts over fresh and clean. Because really, we had to do that at certain spots in our yard. We had to just dig up the lily of the valley. But bitterness will do that. Sin does that. Sin turns into bitterness, and it will grow inside of you, and it grows inside of me, and it will fight all the good. Rolodex in your mind. Think about some of those situations. What does God require of us? He wants us to confess. He wants us to confess, to say, I'm sorry. To say, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I've sinned. I'm sorry. Because here's the beautiful promise of Jesus. And this is why he said, turn the other cheek. Because it's not about the other person where you get whole. It's not. It's about you. Jesus makes you whole. Now, it'd be beautiful if Jesus made the person who wounded you or sinned against you whole as well. But that option's out there at some point. But we spend so much time when we're bitter getting back at someone else that we don't allow our soul to heal from the work of Jesus Christ on the cross. And as you relate and confess and ask the Lord to fill you and comfort you and remove bitterness from your life, you become healed. You become whole. You become healthy. You become not bitter. Not bitter. That's important. Only then do you have the capability of turning the other cheek. Only then. Most of the time, if you got smacked in the face, what are you going to do? Hit this way, come back with the right cross. Anybody ever been robbed before? like been actually robbed. It's a fun feeling, right? One time this guy at Wendy's came in. I was managing a Wendy's. I used to do that in my yesterday life. I've talked about it a couple times. Came in to this Wendy's in East St. Paul, Twin Cities, and was robbing us. And we're like, yikes. And it was a little guy. Have I told this story here? Comes in, like, to take us, right, with like, and we just kind of pushed him against the register in the back room. So, like in Wendy's, you can just kind of run into the back if you really wanted to. You try it out sometime. Yeah, they will, but they won't know what to do. You run in there, they'll be like, and you just take some fries and run out. Nobody will even, they'll be like, all right. But it was interesting. The fear that happened on me and my coworkers as this guy kind of went boom, 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 and then he was down, and then people were on him, and then we just kind of sat there and waited for the police to come. There was a moment where I was like angry, and I wanted to just kick him in the head. But then I started to feel sorry for him and sad and like disappointed and hurt. And I started to go, I wonder what's going on in this guy's life to where he felt like he needed to rob a Wendy's. That's bad. Sin does that. Sin does that. It's not our instinct to just take it on the chin. It's not my instinct to like have a guy stab me in the belly. I want to fight back. Fighting back is our instinct. How many of you are resisting what God's trying to do in your life because you're fighting back? I'm not going to labor on much longer, but there's a resistance that, and I know this, I guess I'm speaking to men right now, because this does feel very feminine sometimes. It just does. But there's a resistance, I think, that us guys have to where we don't want to admit that we messed up. We don't want to admit that we don't want to peel back the curtain and allow them to see, or allow someone to see, or allow someone to see our failures, or where we're weak, or where we feel like we let someone down. And I think what God's trying to do is say, hold on to me, and I'll restore you. So this is where communion takes shape for us. This is a moment of confession. In a lot of churches, across the world, at this point in the service is where we begin this process called confession and absolution. It's where the church family together confesses out loud that they've sinned, and they ask for forgiveness. And the pastor or the bishop or the priest will come and he'll absolve of their sin. And it's an interesting experience. But the reality of this is Jesus has absolved us of our sin by his work on the cross. It's our task, our job, our responsibility to confess it. You can't be forgiven for something you don't confess. It's not possible. It's not just like, hey, I'm good. You good? I'm good. There's a confession process. And so I want to invite you to have some quiet. Actually, Pam, if you want to come up and just play a little bit, to have some quiet and confess. Go before the Lord and say, Lord, do not trip over any books. Is anybody still wondering what the books was all about? Because I'll help you again. It's simple. We confuse our walk with Jesus so much. We have to fill it with content and information and this thing and that doctrine and this theology. And at the core of Christianity, at the core of following Jesus, it's this. His work on the cross. His blood shed for you, his body broken for you, for the remission and forgiveness of your sins. And what does it take? Your confession. Lord, I confess my sin before you. I'm sorry that I did this. Lord, will you please forgive me? Jesus, will you please forgive me? I put my faith and trust into you. I trust and love you and you alone. I want to commit my ways and follow you all the days of my life. That is the activity of confession. And if Jacob would have just said that, I feel like we could have solved all kinds of problems. If he just would have said, God, I'm sorry, I screwed up. Or, Mom, no, let's not do that today. Or for Rebecca, it would have been like, okay, I'm sorry, Lord, I didn't trust you. I know that you promised that Jacob would be the one who was the leader, the one who would get the blessing. I wish I would just trust you. How many times has that happened in your life where you don't trust and you act out on your own? So we're going to have some quiet, and I just want you to confess before the Lord what's going on in your world. It's your time to pray, and then I'll walk us through what communion is going to be, and then we'll close. Father in heaven, use this time as we're going into communion to nurture and bring us back into relationship with you in a deep and meaningful way. Lord, restore our soul. Remove bitterness from our life. Lord, help us to draw into your presence again, like I've been praying this morning. Lord, that we would sense and feel and know that you are God, that we would make our ways to follow you, Lord, that we would commit our ways to you. Lord, that we would allow you to work in our lives. Lord, use this time individually and even as families to help us to come back into relationship. In Jesus' name, amen. So here's how we're going to do communion. You can come and get your cup and you can get your bread and you will take it back to your seat and we'll take and eat together. There'll be music and, I don't know, music playing while that's happening. And so Jesus, he took the cup. This is backwards if you read it in Scripture, by the way. He poured it out and he said, this is the cup of the new covenant, my blood shed for you for the remission of your sins. He took the bread, he broke it, he said, my body given to you, my sacrifice for you, so that you could live, you could have life, and life abundantly, life eternal, life so you could have hope. Communion is about hope. So as the worship team's playing, come and take communion. Take the communion back to your seat, and we'll take and eat together.